He stood on our front porch holding those papers like he was handing me a bill I'd never be able to pay. Voice loud enough for the whole street to hear. She owns everything now. You leave with nothing. And I smiled. Not because I was being gracious, not because I was numb. I smiled because the house he was so proudly giving away, he had never owned a single square foot of it. And the woman he was giving it to was about to find that out the hard way.
If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. Let me tell you something about a man who thinks he has won. He stands a little taller. His voice gets a little louder. He looks around to make sure people are watching, because what is the point of winning if nobody sees it? Grant was exactly that kind of man. And on a Thursday afternoon in October, he stood on our own front porch holding a manila envelope like it was the Olympic medal, his voice carrying all the way to the Delgado house across the street. "You have 36 hours, he said. Vera owns everything here now. You leave with nothing, Eleanor." He actually said it twice. The second time a little slower, like maybe I hadn't understood the first time, like I needed the words to settle. Mrs. Kaminsky was out front with her spaniel, Biscuit. She had stopped walking the moment Grant started talking. Two teenage boys on bikes had slowed down at the corner. The Okafor family's minivan was pulling into their driveway, and I could see Patricia Okafor through the windshield, head turned, watching. Grant had timed this. I am certain of it. He wanted the whole block to see Eleanor Caldwell humiliated, reduced, disposed of like a piece of furniture that didn't fit the new decor. He held out the envelope, divorce papers, pre-filed, his attorney's name embossed on the return label in that particular shade of navy that's supposed to signal seriousness and competence. I took it. I held it for a moment. Then I looked up at him. "When exactly did Vera purchase this property?" I asked. "I must have missed that transaction." Something moved across his face, just a flicker, a tiny hesitation in the performance. He covered it fast, went back to his expression of practiced certainty, but I had seen it. "That's not your concern anymore," he said. I said, and I smiled. Not at him, really, more at the situation. Because the house Grant was so confidently signing over to his 28-year-old personal trainer had never been his to give. It had been mine from the day we bought it, held in the Caldwell family trust, documented and recorded, and entirely legally, completely mine. Vera was going to pull up in a moving truck in 36 hours and discover that the grand prize she had spent months maneuvering to claim was built on a foundation of things Grant had simply never bothered to understand. I tucked the envelope under my arm. "I'll have my attorney review this," I said pleasantly, and I went back inside and made myself a cup of coffee. The neighbors could talk about whatever they wanted. I had work to do. To understand what happened on that porch, you have to understand what the 9 years before it looked like. Because from the outside, Grant and I made a lot of sense. We met at a continuing legal education conference in Hartford. He was there representing the wealth management firm where he managed investment portfolios, retirement funds, college savings accounts, the kind of money people hand over to someone they trust completely and then try not to think about too hard. I was presenting a session on contract language and hidden liability clauses, the part of my job where I read what other attorneys wrote and find the sentences that will quietly ruin someone in 10 years. He came to my session. Afterward, he told me it was the most practically useful hour he'd spent at a conference in 5 years. I told him that was a low bar. He laughed, and it was a real laugh, not a networking laugh. And we ended up talking through the cocktail hour and most of dinner. Grant was smart, genuinely smart. Not the kind of smart that needs to tell you how smart it is, which I found refreshing. He had this easy confidence that I confused, for a long time, with solidity. I thought a man who was comfortable in his own skin was a man you could count on. I have since revised that assessment. We dated for 2 years, long enough to know each other's rhythms and bad habits and what the other person is like after a truly bad day. He proposed on a Saturday morning over breakfast in my apartment. No restaurant, no audience. Just him across the table with my grandmother's ring that he had borrowed from my mother without telling me. That was the version of Grant I married, the one who paid attention to the quiet details. Our wedding was at a garden venue in late June, about 120 guests, nothing excessive. My mother Miriam stood in the front row in a cream-colored blazer and cried precisely once at the vows, and then composed herself completely and did not cry again for the rest of the evening because Miriam Caldwell does not make a habit of public emotion. We bought the house 4 years in. A center hall colonial on Rentham Drive in a neighborhood where everybody knew everybody, and the school district ratings were discussed at every social gathering as though they were a form of currency. Good bones, the realtor said about the house. Original hardwood floors, a kitchen that had been updated in the 90s and was now due for another round, a backyard with a flagstone patio, and 2 mature maples that turned extraordinary colors in October. Grant thought we bought it together. We did not. But I'll come back to that. For several years, the life was genuinely good. Sunday mornings reading the paper in the kitchen while something baked. Neighborhood barbecues where we stood around in the backyard and talked about nothing important and felt like people who had figured things out. Annual trips to Hilton Head, where we rented a house 2 streets from the beach and spent a week being deliberately unscheduled. Grant was a good husband in the ways that are easy to be a good husband. He remembered my birthday. He fixed things when they broke. He was interested in my work and proud of my career in a way that felt real. The hard truth is that nothing about the first 6 years gave me any reason to start keeping notes. The hard truth is that it was all very convincing, right up until it wasn't. It was a Wednesday in late April when I first noticed something was wrong. Grant came home at 9:15, which was about an hour and a half later than usual. He came in through the garage, which he always did, but instead of coming into the kitchen where I was finishing up some contract review, he went straight down the hall toward the bedroom. I heard the closet, then the shower. 25 minutes later, he came out in clean clothes and poured himself a glass of water and finally appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Hey," he said, "you eat already." "Hours ago," I said. "Client dinner?" "Yeah, Reynolds. You know how he wants to walk through every single fun position over a 3-course meal." He opened the refrigerator and stared into it. "I'm not even hungry." I nodded, went back to my papers. But here is the thing about spending 15 years reading contracts for a living. You get very good at noticing what is missing, what is not said, where the language goes vague at exactly the moment it should be specific. And the story Grant had just told me had a vague spot the size of a dinner plate. He had not said where the restaurant was. He had not said who else was there. He had gone straight to the shower before coming to find me, which was not something Grant ever did. He showered at the gym in the mornings. At home, he showered before bed, quickly, 8 minutes, not 25. I went to the bedroom while he was in the kitchen. His jacket was draped over the chair in the corner. I checked the collar of the shirt underneath it. There it was, a smear of something pink coral on the inside of the collar, near the button. Not my shade, not a shade I owned. I took a picture with my phone. Flash off. Collar exactly as I found it. Then I went back to the kitchen and told Grant I was heading to bed and that I hoped his dinner had at least been good food, if nothing else. And he said, yeah, the salmon was actually excellent. And I said goodnight. I did not confront him. My mother raised me to understand that confrontation without documentation is just an argument, and arguments can be denied, reframed, and walked back. Documentation cannot. I went to bed and I lay there in the dark and I thought about the coral lipstick and the 25-minute shower and the restaurant he couldn't name, and I decided to start paying closer attention. That was the beginning. 3 weeks after the Wednesday night that I now think of as the turning point, Grant joined a gym. Not the gym 6 minutes from our house where he had a membership he used approximately 4 times a year. A new gym. A boutique place in Fairfield, which is 20 minutes away, which requires driving past 3 other perfectly adequate gyms to get to. The monthly membership was $240. I saw the charge on our joint card and looked it up. The website had a lot of photographs of exposed brick and good lighting, the kind of gym that sells an identity along with the equipment access. He also, around the same time, acquired a personal trainer. Her name was Vera. I first heard about Vera on a Tuesday morning when Grant was making a smoothie that smelled like a lawn clippings and mango situation. He had a whole new lineup of powders on the counter. Bags and tubs with names that sounded like they had been generated by someone who had only ever heard the concept of nutrition described secondhand. He was talking about Vera the way some people talk about a financial advisor who just made them a lot of money, with that particular blend of gratitude and faint embarrassment, like he knew it sounded like a lot, but he really believed in the process. "She's not just a trainer," he said, tapping the blender lid down. "She works on the whole picture. Physical performance, mental clarity, professional energy. She says most people in high-pressure careers are operating at about 60% capacity because they're not treating their body as a system." "That sounds like something that costs more than $240 a month," I said. He made a face. "She does individualized coaching sessions separately. It's an investment, Eleanor. You of all people should understand the value of specialists." I did understand the value of specialists. What I was understanding right now was that he had been to 3 individual coaching sessions in the past month. I had seen 2 additional charges on the card, both on Tuesday mornings when he claimed early gym sessions, and that the woman behind this investment had a name and a philosophy, and my husband's complete and devoted attention. I looked Vera up that night. Her Instagram had 2,200 followers, lots of short videos about breathing techniques and something she called intentional physical architecture, which appeared to mean standing up straight. Her website listed a certification from an institute in Colorado I had never heard of. Her LLC was called Apex Wellness Collective. She was 28 years old, and she looked like someone who had been specifically designed to make a 52-year-old man feel like he still had options. I closed the laptop and washed the smoothie blender Grant had left in the sink. I kept watching. My Aunt Dorothy died in the spring 7 years ago. She was my mother's older sister, never married, a retired school principal who had spent 40 years living carefully and saving quietly and investing in municipal bonds, the way other people invest in lottery tickets, steadily, without drama, with an unshakable faith that patience compounds. She left me $212,000. My mother called me the week after the funeral, and before I had done anything with the inheritance except let it sit in a money market account, she said, "Eleanor, before you touch that money, come have coffee with me." Miriam Caldwell was a forensic accountant for 35 years. She spent her career following money through corporate structures, finding the assets people hid during divorces and bankruptcies and audits, tracing the routes that numbers take when someone desperately needs them not to be found. She retired at 68 not because she had to, but because she had, in her words, seen enough. She raised me alone after my father had a heart attack when I was 11. She was not a warm woman in the obvious ways. She did not bake or use pet names or give a lot of unsolicited hugs. But she showed up to every school event, reviewed every major decision I ever made with the thoroughness of a professional audit, and told me the truth, even when it was inconvenient. That was her version of love, and it was, I have come to understand, an extremely useful version. We sat in her kitchen with our coffee, and she laid it out for me plainly. "You and Gran are buying a house," she said. "We're looking," I said. "Nothing's decided." "When you buy it," she said, "put it in the trust, your name only, Dorothy's money only. Keep it entirely separate from the marital assets." "Mom, that feels like I'm planning for a divorce before we've even bought the house." She looked at me over her reading glasses. I spent 35 years watching people wish they had protected themselves before they needed to. The ones who did it early slept fine. The ones who didn't spent years in courtrooms. She refilled her coffee. "This isn't about Grant specifically. This is about the fact that you are a woman with an inheritance and a career and a brain, and you should structure your assets accordingly. Always." We bought the house 4 months later. I used Dorothy's inheritance, ran it through the Caldwell Family Revocable Trust, and filed the deed correctly. Grant was at a client conference in Chicago the week I signed the final papers. He knew we were closing. He had signed the cohabitation and mortgage paperwork for his portion of the shared household costs. He simply never read the deed closely enough to notice whose name was actually on it. Or rather, what name was on it? The Caldwell Family Revocable Trust. Eleanor M. Caldwell, trustee. He assumed joint ownership because that is what married people do. He signed his mortgage contribution paperwork without ever asking to see the deed. And in 6 years of living in that house, Grant Hollis never once looked at the actual property record. I did not remind him. It had not seemed necessary. And then it became the most necessary thing in the world. I started the folder in early August, 2 months before Grant threw the papers at me on the porch. It was not one dramatic discovery that made me start building the file. It was an accumulation of small things, each of which was explainable on its own, but which added up to a pattern I recognized from work. In contract law, there is a concept called the escalating material change, a series of small alterations to terms, each one minor enough to seem acceptable, that together constitute an entirely different agreement than what you started with. By the time you notice, the document you are looking at bears almost no resemblance to what you originally signed. That was what was happening to my marriage. And once I saw the pattern, I could not unsee it. I photographed the bank statements Grant left in the chest pocket of his gray blazer in late July. Cash withdrawals, $200 or $300 at a time every Tuesday and sometimes Thursday. No corresponding receipts anywhere in the house. Grant was not a cash person. He used the card for everything, always had, because he said it made expense tracking easier. I noted the charges to a jewelry store in Ridgefield. 2 of them, 6 weeks apart, amounts that did not correspond to anything that had appeared in our home or on my wrists or around my neck. I found, in the pocket of a gym bag left in the garage, a receipt from a restaurant in Westport for 2 people, a Tuesday lunch. He had told me he was at a morning client meeting and working through lunch at his desk. I did not say anything. I took pictures of everything. I kept the folder in a cloud account Grant had no access to and did not know existed, a separate email address I had set up years ago, for exactly the kind of careful record-keeping my mother had taught me to maintain. I labeled files with dates and brief descriptions. I cross-referenced the cash withdrawals with his claimed schedule. I built a timeline. By the end of August, I had documented $4,700 in unexplained cash withdrawals, 2 unexplained jewelry purchases, 11 claimed locations that did not match his actual calendar, and a receipt from a hotel in New Haven for a Friday night stay on a weekend he had told me he was at a conference in Providence. I checked. There was no conference in Providence that weekend. I found the conference he had claimed to attend. It had taken place in March, 4 months earlier. I kept the folder current. I did not tip my hand. I waited. Grant sat me down on a Sunday evening in mid-September. He had made dinner, which in itself was unusual enough that I had already noted it when I came in from the grocery store and found him in the kitchen with a pan situation going on. He had set the table properly, which he also did not normally do. He poured wine before we ate, which was a Thursday and Friday habit and not a Sunday one. I sat down and I waited. He ate about half his dinner, then set his fork down and folded his hands on the table like he was about to chair a difficult meeting. And then he gave me the speech. It had clearly been rehearsed. Not recently. He'd probably been working on it for weeks. He talked about growth and authenticity. He talked about realizing that he had not been fully present in our relationship for some time, and that this was not Eleanor's fault. This was about him and what he needed at this stage of his life. He used the phrase, being true to myself, without any apparent awareness of how it sounded. He said that Vera had helped him understand things about himself that he had been suppressing for years. He said their connection had evolved into something he couldn't ignore, and that he owed Eleanor honesty. He slid a business card across the table, a divorce attorney, already selected. The gesture of a man who had been planning this for a while and felt organized about it. I picked up the card. I looked at it. "Thank you for being honest with me," I said. He blinked. He had clearly prepared for a few different reactions, and calm gratitude was not high on the list. "Eleanor." "No, I mean it," I said. "I appreciate that you told me directly." I stood up and picked up my wine glass. "I'm going to call my own attorney tomorrow. Let's keep the process straightforward." I went into the kitchen and filled a glass of water and stood at the sink, looking out at the backyard for a moment. The maples were just starting to turn. The flagstones on the patio were still warm from the afternoon sun. Then I went upstairs and called my mother. "He told me," I said when she picked up. A pause. "How long do you think it's been going on?" 6 months minimum, probably closer to 9. "And the house?" "Still in the trust. I checked the deed online this morning." She made a sound that was not quite a sigh and not quite satisfaction. Something in between. "All right," she said. "What do you need?" "Nothing yet," I said. "I'm still gathering." "Good girl," she said, and she meant it. My colleague Dennis at the firm had used a private investigator the previous year during a particularly complicated business dispute. He had recommended the man highly. Sharp, discreet, efficient. 2 days later, I was sitting across from a man named Garrett in a coffee shop in Norwalk with a folder of what I had already documented and a check for $1,500 to get him started. Garrett was thorough. I will give him that. He came back to me 10 days later with a comprehensive report on Vera Solis, licensed personal trainer, certification from a nationally accredited organization in Denver. I had the name wrong when I looked it up, it turned out. The certification was legitimate. Her LLC had been registered correctly with the state. No criminal record, no civil judgments in Connecticut. 2 prior addresses, one in Stamford and one in Bridgeport. Current address listed as an apartment complex in Fairfield. Everything checked out. I sat in my car in the parking garage after that meeting and stared at the report. Legitimate certification, clean record, properly registered business. I had spent nearly $3,000, including Garrett's full fee, chasing something that appeared to be completely above board. Maybe Vera was exactly what she appeared to be, a trainer. A young woman who had gotten involved with a client who happened to be married, messy and hurtful and entirely common. I drove home feeling, for the first time since April, genuinely deflated. I almost let it go. I came within about 48 hours of deciding that the situation was exactly as straightforward as it appeared. A husband who had an affair with a trainer, a marriage that was over, a divorce that needed to happen. Clean, simple, and devastating in the normal way. But something kept nagging at me. Garrett had investigated Vera, the current person, her current credentials, her current LLC. He had not looked at what was underneath or what had come before. He had verified the surface and reported back that the surface was intact. The surface is always the last place to look. I went back to my laptop. I started with the LLC registration. Apex Wellness Collective, LLC, registered in Connecticut 14 months ago. Vera Solis, registered agent. The filing address was a street in Bridgeport I looked up on the map. It was a UPS store, a mail drop. Now, a mail drop as a business address is not automatically suspicious. Plenty of small business owners use them for privacy and convenience. But Vera's website said she had been in the wellness industry for 10 years, building her practice through personal relationships and word of mouth. If you have been operating a business for 10 years, you have a history somewhere. Incorporation records, prior business names, a paper trail. I started searching for Vera Solis in other states. It took me 3 evenings and a free trial of a public records database I had used for contract work. But I found her, Vera Solis in Pennsylvania, 5 years ago. A different LLC, different name, Holistic Performance Partners, registered at a mail drop in Allentown. dissolved 18 months after formation. There was a civil complaint filed against that LLC in Lehigh County, a small claims case, judgment for the plaintiff, never paid. Then Vera Solis in New York 3 years ago, another LLC, another mail drop, a fitness and lifestyle consulting entity, dissolved after 2 years. One Better Business Bureau complaint citing failure to deliver promised services after payment. Then Connecticut, 14 months ago, brand new LLC, brand new website, 10 years of claimed experience. The pattern was not subtle once you knew to look for it. She moved. She rebuilt. She found new clients in new places. She kept the surface legitimate enough to pass a basic background check and dissolve before anything serious caught up with her. The question I needed to answer now was, what exactly was she doing? The civil complaint in Pennsylvania was for $3,000. What was the model here? I went back to the website, the individual coaching packages, the wellness consulting services, the investment partnership opportunities for clients interested in expanding the Apex Wellness brand. There it was, investment opportunities. Mrs. Nora Kaminsky had lived 3 houses down from us for 11 years. She walked her spaniel Biscuit every morning at 7:20. She made a very good lemon pound cake that she brought to neighborhood gatherings and would give you the recipe for if you asked, but included at least one ingredient you would later find out she had actually left out. She was 71 years old and had been a retired librarian for 6 years and knew absolutely everything that went on in the neighborhood. She knocked on my door on a Wednesday afternoon in early October with a foil-covered dish and an expression I could not quite read. "I've been wanting to come by," she said. I wasn't sure it was my place, and then I decided that watching and saying nothing is a choice too, and not always the right one. I took the dish and told her to come in. We sat at the kitchen table. She smoothed her slacks. She petted Biscuit, who had settled under her chair. She looked at her hands for a moment. "My daughter Patrice had a trainer," she said, "about 2 years ago, in New Milford before she moved. I think it was the same woman, Eleanor. I've seen her twice at neighborhood events when she came here with Grant, and both times my stomach just—" She stopped. The trainer's name was Vera. I set down my coffee cup. "Patrice gave her money," Nora said carefully. "A significant amount. There was a wellness investment opportunity. It was going to fund a retreat center, a supplement line, something. The details shifted every few months. $40,000 over 8 months. And then Vera moved away, and the investment dissolved, and nothing was ever built." "Did Patrice report it?" "She talked to an attorney. She was told it would be expensive and difficult and that she had signed documents that made the transfers look voluntary." Nora finally looked up at me. I should have said something when I first recognized her. I saw her here in October of last year. I talked myself out of it. I thought, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's a different person. "You're not wrong," I said. She nodded once, slowly. "I didn't think I was." I reached across the table and put my hand over hers for a moment. Then I picked up my pen. "Tell me everything Patrice told you," I said. "Every detail you remember." Nora gave me Patrice's number and texted her daughter to let her know I would be calling. That same evening, I called. Patrice answered on the second ring. She sounded cautious in the way people sound when they have been embarrassed by something and are not sure how much of it they want to revisit. "My mother says you know Vera," she said. "She has been training my husband," I said, "among other things." A short silence. "I'm sorry," she said, and she sounded like she meant it in a very specific way. "I've been doing some research," I said. "I found her LLC history going back to Pennsylvania. I found the civil case in Lehigh County. I think she's been running some version of the same thing for several years and moving when it gets too close." The caution dissolved. "The investment opportunity," Patrice said. She framed it as a partnership. She said she had investors already lined up. She just needed committed wellness advocates who understood the vision. She called it a founding circle, made it sound exclusive, like you were being let in on something. How did the money change hands? Wire transfer to the LLC account. She had contracts. They looked professional. She had them reviewed by someone she referred to as her business attorney, who I later tried to find and could not locate. A pause. The contracts authorized the transfers and included language about speculative investment risk. She was careful about that part. Do you still have the contracts? I have copies, scanned, on my laptop. Another pause. I should have done something more. My attorney told me I had a case, but that it would cost more to pursue than I would likely recover. And I had just gotten divorced, and I didn't have the energy. I walked away. You didn't walk away, I said. You survived it and moved on. That's different. I let that sit for a second. Would you be willing to share those documents with me? I'm working with a civil litigation attorney, and I think we may be building something larger than just my situation. The pause this time was longer. I could hear her breathing. If it means she actually faces consequences, Patrice said. Yes, absolutely yes. I printed Patrice's documents at the office 2 days after our call. She had emailed them, 5 files total. The original contract, 3 amendments, and a letter from Vera on Apex Wellness letterhead, promising a development update that had never arrived. I printed everything, put the stack in a manila folder, and carried it to my car with my laptop bag. I was inside for 40 minutes, a brief meeting with a colleague about a contract review, nothing urgent. When I came back out to the parking garage, the passenger window of my car was gone. Not cracked. Gone. Safety glass pebbles all over the seat and the floor. My laptop bag was missing. The manila folder was missing. My car charger was still there, which told me this was not a random smash and grab for resaleable items. Someone had taken specific things. I stood there in the garage for a moment, quiet concrete. The smell of exhaust and something chalky from the broken glass. Then I called the police, because that is what you do. The responding officer was professional and tired in equal measure. I filed the report. He gave me a case number and very low expectations about recovery. I did not tell him what had been in the folder or the bag. When I got to my car, I called Patrice. Do you have another copy of those files? They're in my email and on a backup drive, she said immediately. Why? Send them again, I said. And don't print anything else for now. Keep everything digital. Then I called Cecily. Cecily Odom had been 2 years ahead of me in law school. We had kept in loose but genuine touch for 20 years. She was now a civil litigation partner at a firm in New Haven with a particular focus on financial fraud cases. I had sent her a summary 2 weeks earlier, casually, asking for her read on the situation. She had responded with 3 pages of legal analysis and the phrase, "This is wire fraud," underlined. Someone took the documents, I said when she answered. A beat. From you directly? Broke my car window in the parking garage. Took the folder in my laptop. Eleanor. Her voice went careful. This changes the threat assessment somewhat. I know. It also tells us we're on the right track. I know that too, I said. She told me to come to her office the next morning. We were going to need to do everything differently from this point forward. No printed copies, no physical documents left unsecured. Everything in encrypted cloud storage. Every communication through channels we controlled. And we were going to need to move faster because whoever had been watching me knew I was looking. I posted in the neighborhood community Facebook group on a Thursday night. I was careful about it. I did not name Vera. I did not describe the situation in detail. I wrote that I was conducting private research regarding a wellness business operating in Fairfield County, and that if anyone had had a professional or financial experience with an entity called Apex Wellness Collective or its predecessor businesses, I would welcome a confidential conversation. I left my personal email address and I went to bed. By Friday morning, I had 7 responses. 3 of them were neighbors I knew by name. Linda Frazier from the Pilates class I had attended twice and then abandoned. Christine Park, whose husband I recognized from the country club. A man named Raymond Ostrowski, who I knew by sight, retired, lived on the next street over, had a workshop in his garage where he built furniture on weekends. The other 4 were from towns nearby who had apparently seen the post shared in adjacent groups. Shelton, Orange, Darby, a woman as far away as Milford. I read every message twice. The details varied in their specifics. Different amounts, different timelines, different investment vehicles Vera had proposed. But the structure was identical every time. The approach through fitness, the relationship building, the introduction of an exclusive investment opportunity, the contracts that looked professional and included the careful risk language, the money transferred, and the subsequent silence. Raymond Ostrowski had lost $11,000 on a supplement distribution venture. Christine Park's husband had put in $22,000 toward what was described as a wellness retreat development fund. Linda Frazier had invested $8,000 and then another $6,000 when Vera told her the project needed additional founding circle commitments before moving forward. 7 victims in Fairfield County alone. I forwarded everything to Cecily. She called me within the hour. "How quickly can you get these people to meet with me?" she said. "Give me a week," I said. "Make it 5 days," she said. We met on a Tuesday evening at Cecily's office in New Haven. Cecily had arranged a conference room with a long table and an assortment of decent coffee and a legal pad at every seat. I had arranged for everyone to be there. Patrice, who had driven down from New Milford, Linda Frazier, Christine Park, Raymond Ostrowski, and his wife Donna, who had not been involved financially, but who had relevant information about a business proposal Vera had made at a neighborhood gathering. 2 of the women from the out-of-town responses who had agreed to come in person. Cecily introduced herself and explained what she was looking at. A potential civil fraud case with possible criminal referral to the state attorney's office. She was clear, direct, and did not minimize what she was telling them. "What she has been doing," Cecily said, "is not legally gray. The investment contracts included risk disclosure language, which is why she got away with it long enough to build a file this size. But wire fraud does not require that the victim failed to read what they signed. It requires that the person who solicited the funds never intended to deliver what they promised. And based on what I am seeing across these cases, the pattern is consistent enough that I believe we can establish intent." She went around the table. Every person had documents. Most had emails. Raymond had a recorded phone call. He had gotten into the habit of recording business calls after a contracting dispute years ago, and had simply kept the habit. "I didn't know it would matter," he said, sliding his phone across the table to Cecily. "I just do it automatically now." Cecily listened to about 40 seconds and looked at me. "This is going to matter," she said. After the meeting, I walked to my car with Cecily. The evening was cold, clear, the kind of October night where you can smell the leaves and the asphalt and someone's wood fire from half a street away. "Are you ready for the next part?" she said. "What's the next part?" "She's going to find out she can't take that house, and then everything is going to move quickly." I had known this was coming. The 36 hours, the porch, the papers. It was already scheduled in my head like an appointment. "I've been ready for 8 weeks," I said. The morning after Grant threw the papers at me on the porch, I was at Cecily's office by 8:30. We filed the civil complaint that morning, incorporating all 7 Fairfield County victims as plaintiffs, with documentation from Patrice's case in New Milford referenced as pattern evidence. Cecily had already drafted the referral letter to the state attorney's office. We sent it with the full file attached. The LLC history across 3 states, the contracts, Raymond's recording, the financial transfer records every victim had provided, and the Pennsylvania civil judgment from 5 years ago. Then I called the Caldwell family trust attorney, a quiet man named Howard Birch, who had handled my Aunt Dorothy's estate and set up the trust structure in the first place. I asked him to pull the certified deed and prepare a letter confirming the current legal ownership of the property at Wrentham Drive. Is someone disputing ownership? He asked. They're about to try, I said. He had the letter to me by noon. I also called Nora. She's moving in tomorrow, I said. Vera. Grant told her she owns the house. A pause. Does she know? She's about to find out. Would you like me to watch? Nora said. I think you're going to watch whether I ask you to or not. True, she said. I'll have my phone. That afternoon, I packed a bag. Not because I was leaving, I was not leaving, but because I was going to spend the night at my mother's house in Westport. I wanted to be somewhere else when Vera arrived. I did not want to be standing in the driveway watching the whole thing unfold like a scene I had written. I wanted the distance. I drove to Westport with the certified letter in my bag and my laptop in the back seat and my full cloud-based evidence file accessible from anywhere in the world. Miriam made pot roast. We ate it at her kitchen table and did not talk about the case. We talked about the neighborhood she had grown up in, which was now entirely unrecognizable. We talked about a documentary she had watched about the Postal Service that she found surprisingly interesting. She did not ask me if I was okay. She could see that I was. I slept 8 hours, which was the best I had slept in 2 months. I was back at Cecily's office by 9 in the morning when Nora texted me. Moving truck just pulled up. White truck. 2 movers. A woman directing them. I kept working on the filing documents in front of me. 15 minutes later, locksmith just arrived. They're trying to change the front lock. I set down my pen, waited. 12 minutes after that, locksmith is packing up. Looks like a problem. Then, the woman is on her phone. She does not look happy. Grant just pulled up. I could picture it. Grant in his car, not understanding why his girlfriend was standing in the driveway instead of inside the house, directing the movers. The locksmith explaining that the deed showed a trust name he had no authorization to override. Vera calling Grant. Grant calling his attorney, because Grant always called his attorney when something was not going the way he had planned, as though attorneys were a reset button. Cecily's paralegal appeared in the doorway. Your ex's counsel just called, she said. They want to discuss the property situation. I'm sure they do, Cecily said without looking up. Grant's attorney called back an hour later. Cecily took the call on speaker with me in the room. He was a reasonable man doing an unreasonable job, and he knew it. He asked whether there was any possibility of a misunderstanding regarding the title. Cecily told him there was not. She explained the trust structure, the filing date, the recorded deed, and the certified letter from Howard Birch. She offered to send the documents within the hour. My client was under the impression, Grant's attorney began. That's the problem, Cecily said. He had an impression rather than documentation. Those are not the same thing. A pause on the line. We'll need some time to review, he said. Take all the time you need, Cecily said. The house isn't going anywhere. She ended the call and we looked at each other. He really never looked at the deed, she said. It was not quite a question. He never looked at anything he assumed was already handled, I said. My phone buzzed. Nora, moving truck is leaving. Grant just drove away. She's standing in the driveway alone now. Biscuit wanted to go say hello, but I thought better of it. I set down my phone. I looked out the window at the October sky, flat and white and still. I thought about Aunt Dorothy in her small house in Westport, clipping coupons and buying municipal bonds and being careful in all the quiet ways that nobody ever notices until they matter enormously. I thought about my mother at that kitchen table years ago, saying, put it in the trust, keep it separate. You never know. She never knew, I said aloud. Who? Said Cecily. Dorothy. She never knew she was protecting me. She was just being herself. Cecily was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up her pen. Let's keep going, she said. He called at 4:17 in the afternoon. I know the exact time because I was in my car driving back to my mother's house, and I saw his name on the screen, and I pulled into a gas station parking lot before I answered. Eleanor. His voice had the particular tone of a man who has just discovered that the ground under his feet is not what he thought it was. Grant, I said. What did you do? Not angry, not yet. Scared, which was something I had very rarely heard from him. My attorney says the house is in a trust. Your trust. He says you own it and I have no claim. That's correct, I said. For how long? Since we bought it. Dorothy's inheritance. I used it for the purchase and the title went into the Caldwell Trust. It's been documented and recorded since the closing date. A silence that had several different things happening in it. You never told me. You never asked, I said. You saw the mortgage paperwork for your contribution to household costs and assumed joint ownership. The deed was always available as a public record. Any attorney could have told you. Eleanor, Grant. I kept my voice level. You stood on our front porch and told the entire neighborhood that your girlfriend owned my house. You have been telling Vera that she was about to move into a property you could give her. You've been conducting this whole arrangement under a fundamental misunderstanding about what was yours to give. I paused. That is not something I did to you. That is something that happened because you never paid attention to the details. Another silence. She's very upset. He said it like this was information I would want to have. I imagine she is, I said. My attorney says we could contest. Your attorney knows you cannot, I said. Your attorney told you that this morning, I would guess, and you are calling me, hoping I will offer you something to make this less embarrassing. I'm not going to do that. He was quiet for a long time. What happens now? He said finally. Smaller. The performance entirely gone. The divorce proceeds, I said. My attorney will be in contact with yours about the settlement terms. Those will not include any claim on the house. I pulled the car back into gear. I hope things work out for you, Grant. I genuinely mean that, but I am not in a position to help you with the situation you created. I ended the call. I sat in the gas station parking lot for another minute, engine running, watching a man in a red jacket fill his tank across from me. He was humming something I couldn't quite make out. Then I pulled out and drove to my mother's house and ate the leftover pot roast and slept another 8 hours. The state attorney's office opened a formal inquiry 3 weeks after Cecily submitted the referral. I know this because an investigator named Donna Ferrante called me on a Thursday morning and asked if I was available to come in and make a formal statement. She had a no-nonsense phone manner that I appreciated immediately. She had already spoken with Cecily and had reviewed the file. How did you compile all of this? She asked when I sat down across from her. Public records, I said. State business filings, court databases. The Lehigh County case took a few extra days because Pennsylvania's system is not as user-friendly as Connecticut's. She looked at me for a moment. What do you do for work? Corporate contracts attorney, I said. She made a small sound that might have been amusement. That explains it. Over the next 6 weeks, the investigation expanded in both directions, backward through Vera's history in other states and forward into the current financial situation. A forensic accountant from the AG's office traced the money from all 7 Fairfield County victims through the Apex Wellness, LLC, and out the other side into accounts that were significantly less traceable. He found that Vera had structured the transfers carefully, but not carefully enough. Raymond's recording was the clearest single piece of evidence. In it, Vera explicitly promised a specific return on investment by a specific date, which constituted a securities violation on top of the fraud charges. When Donna Ferrante called to tell me this, she sounded the particular way investigators sound when a case they thought was solid becomes significantly more solid. Grant's name came up twice in the documentation, as someone who had made introductions to 2 of the local victims and who had facilitated at least one meeting between Vera and a potential investor. His attorney got ahead of it immediately. Grant cooperated fully with the investigation. He was not charged. He did lose 3 clients when the story began circulating in professional circles, because in wealth management, having facilitated, however unknowingly, an introduction to a fraud scheme is the kind of thing that tends to travel. He took a reduced role at the firm with additional compliance oversight. I did not feel satisfaction about that exactly, but I did not feel sorry either. Vera retained an attorney who made 2 unsuccessful attempts to negotiate a plea agreement. The prosecutor's office declined both times. The evidence was too clean. They wanted the trial and they wanted the outcome to be public. Her trial was scheduled for March. It was a Saturday in early April when I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and thought about how much had happened since October. The divorce had been finalized in February. Cecily had handled most of it with a family law attorney she brought in for the specific marital asset negotiations. The final decree gave me the house, fully legally in the Caldwell Trust, exactly as it had always been, and a clean division of the financial accounts we had actually held jointly. There was a clause preventing Grant from ever asserting any future interest in the property or the inheritance it had come from. His attorney had not fought that particular clause very hard. Vera's trial had begun in mid-March. I testified on the second day. I was on the stand for about an hour and 20 minutes. I described the pattern I had identified in the business filings, the LLC history across 3 states, the structural similarities between what had happened in Pennsylvania and New York and Connecticut. I was not the most dramatic witness. Raymond Ostrowski, who sat in the stand with his phone and played the recording for the courtroom, was the most dramatic witness. The recording ran for 4 minutes and 12 seconds, and the courtroom was very quiet for all of it. The jury deliberated for 5.5 hours. They came back with guilty verdicts on all counts: wire fraud, unlicensed securities solicitation, and tax evasion on the unreported income the forensic accountant had traced. The sentencing was scheduled for late April. Vera faced a minimum of 3 years and potentially closer to 6. Cecily's civil lawsuit was resolved out of court the week after the criminal verdict. Vera's attorney finally convinced her that a jury in the civil case was going to be even less sympathetic than the criminal one had been. She agreed to full restitution for all 7 plaintiffs in Fairfield County and both out-of-county cases that had joined the suit. Payments structured over 15 years, garnished directly from any wages she earned after release. It was not everything. It was not fast, but it was documented and enforceable, and it would follow her. My career had taken a turn I had not anticipated. Word moves through legal circles in this state the way water moves through limestone, quietly, persistently, finding every crack. Cecily had talked. Howard Birch had mentioned it to a colleague. Donna Ferrante from the AG's office had, at her retirement party in March, apparently said something complimentary about the quality of the documentation I had produced. 2 firms had contacted me about consulting on financial fraud cases with a domestic component, situations where a spouse or partner was the vehicle through which the fraud entered a family. A legal technology company wanted to talk about training materials. And I had developed and started teaching a continuing education course called Financial Fraud in Personal Relationships, which covered recognition, documentation, and legal response. The first session enrolled 19 attorneys. The second session had a waiting list of 31. Nora and I had coffee on Thursday mornings. She brought biscuit and sometimes the lemon pound cake, which I had learned to make myself after she gave me the recipe, including the actual full recipe, because she respected what I had done, and that was apparently how Nora Kaminsky showed respect. Patrice had driven down for the verdict. We had dinner afterward with Cecily and Raymond and 2 of the other plaintiffs, and we talked for 4 hours and ate an enormous amount of food and laughed at things that 6 months ago had not been funny at all. The kind of laughing you can only do once something is finished. At our April dinner, Patrice told me she had started a new job she was happy in and had moved to a better apartment and was, in her words, fine. She said it the way you say it when you actually mean it. My mother came to visit the Saturday after the sentencing. We sat in the kitchen, coffee on the table, the April light coming in through the windows at that particular late morning angle that makes everything look like it is being reconsidered. "You built something out of it," she said. Not a compliment, exactly. A statement. An accounting. "I just followed the pattern," I said. "Once you see it, the rest is documentation." She looked at me over her reading glasses. "You get that from Dorothy," she said. She was the patient one. I always wanted to move faster. "You told me to put the house in the trust." "I did," she said. "That was the whole thing, Mom. That one decision." She was quiet for a moment. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. Outside, the maples were coming back. Small new leaves on the branches, the particular tentative green of April trees that haven't fully committed to the season yet. "Dorothy would have found that very satisfying," she said. "I think so too," I said. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Cecily. Sentencing came in. 4 years, 3 months. Judge cited the multi-state pattern as an aggravating factor. Restitution order confirmed. I set the phone back down. My mother looked at me. "Good news?" "Very," I said. She picked up her coffee cup. I picked up mine. We sat there in the kitchen for a while, not talking, just being in the house that had always been mine, the house my aunt had quietly funded and my mother had protected and the wrong people had tried to claim and the right documentation had preserved. The coffee was hot. The light was good. The trees were coming back. I had a Tuesday consultation, a Thursday filing, and a Wednesday evening class to teach. I had friends who had been through something with me. I had work that mattered, and a house that was mine, and a life that was, after all of it, exactly as solid as I had always built things to be. When you know how to read what is not written on the page, it turns out you can protect almost anything, including yourself. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.